I am Miranda with the REI Co-op. I am a longtime REI employee and a lover of camping and the outdoors. And this is the REI Co-op class, Intro to Camping. So this is a 5-part class that will cover everything that you need to know to go spend a night outdoors. I'm going to cover a lot of different topics in here, and it's a ton of information, so use the links below for additional resources and articles, as well as some resources that you can print off and download. There's also a couple videos linked below that might be helpful. My recommendation would be to watch through the entire class and then go back and rewatch the stuff if you have any additional questions. On the topic of questions, you can also check out REI Conversations, which is our online forum for members and employees to interact and ask questions about different topics that you might need to know more about. Great, so let's get into it. The 5 topics that we are covering in this class are how to select a tent site and set up your tent, how to sleep warm, some campfire construction tips, how to cook at camp, and then some additional magic moments that will really make the most of your night outside. Let's get into it. In this video, we're going to cover everything you need to know to get out and take a camping trip. Now, before I get started, I'm going to be referencing different terminology on parts of a tent. So if you're unfamiliar with any of that, go ahead and reference the graphic below so that you can follow along. This video will cover gathering your gear for your trip, picking a spot to set your tent up, setting up your tent, and then, of course, some guidelines for how to stabilize or guy out your tent. So first up is preparing for your trip. This is arguably the most important part of going camping before you get to go do the fun stuff. So yeah, make sure that you take your time on this. The first thing you'll want to do is research the campsite as well as the area that you're headed to. If you are going to an area that's very popular, you might need to book your site online, sometimes several months in advance. But if you're just headed to a place where you're hoping to get a drive-up site or a first come, first serve, or even if you're going to a private campground, it's still really important that you know the regulations and the rules of the area. So when I say rules, I mean not only what the campsite itself allows, but also things like dogs for national parks or different restrictions for the area, as well as like fire safety, which could be seasonal, noise levels, and then of course food safety or how you store your food. Knowing all of this ahead of time is going to make it a lot easier when you get there to, be prepared, obviously. So once you know the rules and the regulations and you've done all your campsite research, the next step is to gather your gear, which is the most fun part. So there is a checklist that REI has that will walk you through an extensive list of things that you can bring with you. I'd recommend referencing this list just to make sure that you have the essentials. Obviously, you don't need to bring everything on the list unless you really want to, but this will just, again, help you be prepared for your trip. Whether you are renting gear or buying all new gear or borrowing gear from friends, the next thing to do is to set it all up at home and practice. I know that this might seem sort of silly to do, and it can be challenging if you have a small place, but believe me, you don't want to be setting up your 4-person tent for the first time in the pitch dark or trying to turn your stove on when you're starving and ready for dinner. So just practice at home, set it all up, feel comfortable with it, and that way when you get outside and you're setting it up again at your campsite, you can focus on the fun stuff, like the hanging out at your campsite. One last thing I want to mention before you go are leave no trace or LNT principles. These are a set of principles, things like pack it in, pack it out, or safe food storage, that we follow in the outdoors so we can be good stewards of the area. I'm not going to go into detail on this. There are articles that you can look at as well as lots of sources. But again, these are just things that we do so that we can leave the area preserved for ourselves and for people who come after us and for all the animals and plants that we're sharing the habitat with. Once you've picked a campground, the next thing to do will be to pick your camp site. So a lot of campgrounds are bookable online now, which is very cool. And you can see photos of the campsites as well as a map that lays out the whole area. And from there, you'll want to choose your site based on a few different factors. Might be things like proximity to water or proximity to the bathrooms, or at least upwind of the bathrooms, as well as just like the general location within the campground. If you're doing a first come, first serve or a drive-in site, you can pick a site based on availability. You might also want to stay away from other groups, or if you're a tent, stay away from RVs just to help control the noise level and get a better night's sleep. So most campgrounds have already done the work for you in choosing a spot for your tent, be this just a large flat area or a tent platform. Use the location that you have. Tent platforms will often be leveled ground that make it really easy to set up your tent. So make sure that your tent will fit on the platform and choose your site accordingly to that. If you don't have a tent platform, or if there's not a clearly designated area for your tent, just try and find a large flat area that will fit your tent's footprint and then set up there. A couple things to consider when you're choosing a spot to set up your tent. The first one would be the angle of the ground. If the ground is slanted, you'll want to set your tent up so your head is uphill. Also, avoid putting your tent in a low area of your campsite, as this can collect water as well as cold air. So try and keep your tent up a little bit higher. The other thing to consider is tree coverage. If you want to have a view of the night sky, you might want to set your tent up out from underneath the trees, but this will be less protected from the cold as well as wind, and obviously if you have rain, that also is exposed in the elements. So if you do decide to set your tent up underneath the trees, then you'll have a little bit more protection from the cold weather as well as the rain and the wind. However, if you set your tent up underneath a tree, make sure you look up and ensure that there aren't any dead branches or things that could fall and present a hazard. So this is my tent site. If you are at a campsite with a designated tent platform, you might have like wood barriers on the sides of your site, but either way, what you'll want to do is clear debris. So obviously I have some large pieces of debris here at my campsite, like big sticks and things. So I'm gonna clear all of these out of the way first. The reason that we clear debris is that if you get really excited and just start setting your tent up, you might accidentally put your tent on something that is uncomfortable to sleep on or even potentially damaging to your tent. Yeah, mostly sticks, pine cones, and rocks is what you want to get rid of. I'm not going to be able to clear this entire site, which is fine. You really just want, again, big stuff that could be really uncomfortable to sleep on or harmful to your tent. So now I have totally cleared my site of debris and kicked aside any smaller things, and the next step is to set up my tent. So there's kind of two schools of thought on this. You can either lay out your footprint if you're using one and then add your tent body and stake those first. One thing to mention, using a footprint is always recommended, but you don't necessarily have to have one. Again, it's just an extra layer of protection for your tent. So you can either lay out that footprint first and then add the tent body and assemble the poles on top of it, move your tent around, stake it down, or you can lay out the tent footprint and the body, stake that first, then assemble the poles and set the tent up. If you are setting up the tent by yourself, it's going to be a lot easier to stake it first and then add the poles so you don't have the tent escaping you as you're trying to attach the poles. But if you have help from a friend, then you can always set the tent up first completely, adjust it the way that you want it, and then stake it down from there. Cool, so let's do it. All right, so I'm gonna start by laying out the footprint of my tent and orienting it so that the door is actually facing towards you. And then I am gonna stake it first because I'm just one person and this is a pretty big tent, so it's gonna be a lot easier to attach the poles after it's been staked. Now that I have the body of my tent laid down and staked with the footprint, and the poles are all assembled and laid out across the tent, the next step obviously is to put it together and get your tent looking like a tent. The reason I've laid the poles out like this on top of the body of the tent is that it's gonna make it a lot easier to see where everything needs to go and to make sure that I have all these parts and pieces done before I start trying to get it up and looking like a tent. So yeah, there are a few different types of connections that you might see on your tent. So you might have clips like this. These two clips are actually where poles intersect. And then I also have these smaller clips for a single pole. And then you may also have sleeves. This tent actually has all of the above. So I have this sleeve here where my cross pole will go. And then I do also have these grommets where the pole will get connected. One thing to note is that if you have a larger tent like I do, you'll probably have to do something in the middle top of the tent before you connect it to the grommets, because you're not gonna be able to reach this section of the tent once it's been assembled. I'm not gonna go into the details of how to set up this tent specifically, just know that you should follow the instructions on your tent, and yeah, follow them step by step, because again, you don't want to pop your tent up and realize that you missed a connection on something that you can now no longer reach. So my two front and back poles that I have actually need to get connected in the center between this loop here And I'll want to do this before I attach anything to grommets or even start clipping the tent. In fact, you don't want to clip any of the clips to the poles until you've already attached them to the grommets and got the pole structure up, and then from there you'll start clipping the points to your poles. I'd be lying if I said that this tent is easy to set up by yourself. So this is another example of when it'd be good to practice something at home, or, to bring a buddy or ask for an extra set of hands when you get to the campground. To stabilize my tent or use guy lines, I'll need to have the fly on the tent. Guy lines are something that we use just to provide extra stability and structure to the tent, especially to protect it from wind, because hard winds can collapse your tent. And so the first step for doing this is actually to attach these Velcro tabs to your poles of your tent. These points you can see you have a Velcro tab on the inside of the fly, and then those are in the same spot as the attachment point for the guy line. So by attaching this to the pole and then attaching a guy line or a cord to this tab and sticking that farther away from your tent, what you're really doing is adding structure or like a point of connection with that pole to the ground. Again, guy line's just all about adding stability to the tent. So we're gonna go ahead and attach these to the poles and put on the rain fly.
Which one is the front best?
Cool, so I have the rain fly on my tent. This is technically the back side of my tent. What I'm going to do is connect these Velcro tabs. So this longer piece of Velcro is actually gonna go around both of these poles. And you can see I've got the tab on the side where the guy line will go. And we're just gonna do that all the way around. Great, now that Velcro is connected, I am actually going to buckle my fly to the footprint. Depending on what type of tent you have or how old your tent is, you might not have a buckle at the connection of the tent and the rain fly. So just attach it however you're supposed to, based on what your tent instructions say. Okay, so I have my tent all set up, and in nice weather like I have today, or where there's not a lot of wind, this would be just fine for stability of your tent. But if you are in an area that's very windy, you might need to add guy lines. So these will probably come with your tent, but they likely won't be attached to your tent. And all a guy line is just this like cord of some sort that is designed to attach to the pole and then provide additional structure. So I've attached this to my rain fly using a bowline. I'm not gonna go into the details of how to tie a bowline, but we do have a handy video and some articles that you can check out so you're familiar with this knot. In general, it's just a really helpful one to know, so I'd highly recommend learning it. Another reminder, this is not just attached to my rain fly, it is, again, at the same connection point where that Velcro is attached to the pole. So really what's happening with this guy line is that I am pulling the pole, and that's providing the additional stability and structure. Great, so once you have your guy line attached, you then want to stake it out away from your tent. Ideally, you're looking to get about a 90-degree angle from the pole with the guy line. Obviously, this is not a 90-degree angle, but basically what that means is that you just want to go pretty far away from your tent. So now that I know roughly how far away I'm going to stake from my tent, the next thing to decide is the location of the stake. My tent body makes an angle where the corner of the pole is, and so essentially what I want to do is imagine a line going through corner to corner of my tent and extending past this pole, and I want the guy line to follow along that imaginary line. This is for the corners of your tent. If you're guying out the sides of your tent, you just want to basically go perpendicular with the line. And so yeah, from here, I'm essentially going as far away, as 90 degrees as possible, and pulling this tight and then tensioning it. So on my guy line, I have this little black tensioner that came with it. If you don't have a tensioner on your line, there is a pretty cool hitch called the trucker's hitch that will allow you to tension the line. So we will link a video and an article on how to tie the trucker's hitch. Another just super helpful knot to know in the outdoors. And you can use that as opposed to having a tensioner. My guy line also has this little reflective tab on it, and this will help you see the guy line at night so that you don't trip over it, which is something that I have done before. Great, so now you know how to guy out your tent, and you should be all set up for a night in the outdoors. This video is going to cover how to sleep warm while you are camping. This includes your sleep systems, which is essentially everything that makes up your camping bed, as well as a couple of tips and tricks for how to stay warm even when the weather gets cold. Okay, so let's talk about sleep systems. When we talk about a sleep system for camping, we're really referring to your sleeping pad and your sleeping bag working together to provide the maximum amount of warmth. When you're choosing sleeping pads, there are a couple different considerations, but really there's three main types of sleeping pads. You have air pads, like this one, closed cell foam pads, like this one, but the most common type of sleeping pad for camping is going to be an open cell foam pad or a self-inflating pad like this one that I have here. You also might see some cots for camping. These generally will allow you to be up off the ground a little bit, and they might have a layer of padding or they might have no padding whatsoever, which brings us into the insulation type for your sleeping pad. So sleeping pads will have a R value or an insulation value, and the higher the number for R value, the warmer the sleeping pad is going to be. So if you are using a cot and it doesn't have any sort of insulation, you might need to add a sleeping pad to again bring that insulation value up a little bit, especially in colder months. If you're going camping and you don't want to purchase a sleeping pad, but you have an air mattress at home, you might be tempted to use it, and that's totally fine. But do keep in mind that air mattresses don't have any insulation. You're really just sleeping on cold air. So if that's what you decide to do, I would recommend bringing an extra comforter or a couple blankets just to lay on top of the air mattress before you sleep on it, because this will add a little bit of extra insulation and keep you from basically sleeping on an ice block. This also brings us over to sleeping bags. So your sleeping bag has a temperature rating on it. I'm not going to dive too deep into temperature rating, but just know that if you are a cold sleeper, you should probably get a sleeping bag that has a warmer temperature rating than the temperature it's going to be. So if you're expecting to be camping in 30-degree weather, maybe go ahead and buy a 20-degree bag just to stay comfortable. Your sleeping bag on its own does not provide all of the warmth. It has to work in conjunction with your sleeping pad, hence being called a sleep system. So when you think about sleeping bags, you might be thinking of a mummy bag, something really constrictive, like this guy. While most backpackers are going to choose a mummy bag because it helps cut down on weight, if you're car camping, you really don't need to go with something this restrictive, and you have a couple more options, especially for things that are going to feel more like comforters or blankets at home, like this rectangular bag. So this rectangular sleeping bag is going to provide enough warmth and enough comfort for when you're camping, as long as it's working in conjunction with your sleeping pad. I'm not going too in-depth on how to choose sleeping pads and sleeping bags, but there are articles and videos linked below that you can check out if you want more information. So you have your sleep system taken care of, but if you're still feeling cold, there are a couple of tips and tricks that you can do to stay warm. The first one of those is wear clothes. This is actually how your sleeping bag and sleeping pad are tested to get their temperature rating. So if you are feeling cold in your sleeping bag, put on a set of long underwear or even a hat and some socks. Just basically bring pajamas. This should be an obvious one, but adding clothing is going to keep you warmer. Also, if you have a lot of dead air space around you, say if you're in a rectangular sleeping bag, you can actually add extra clothing or insulation on the inside of your sleeping bag, because this will close the space around you that your body is trying to heat. That's how insulation works. Your body is heating up the air around you, and the less space there is, the warmer you're going to stay, because there's less air to heat. You can also use a hot water bottle, like my Nalgene here. Nalgenes can actually withstand boiling water, so a great thing to do before bed is warm up some water, pour it into your Nalgene, cover it with a sock or a shirt or something, and you can either cuddle with this at night, or you can actually put it between your legs where it will basically touch your femoral artery, which is going to help heat your entire body. This is probably one of my favorite tips for staying warm at night. I highly recommend it. It definitely makes a huge difference. You can also eat a light snack before you go to sleep. Something that's high in fat is going to be a slow burn for your body. So if this is a tablespoon of peanut butter or some avocado or whatever it is that you want to eat, this is just going to help your metabolism work, which is going to heat up your body. And you can also do some light exercise. Nothing crazy that's going to wake you up, but things like sit-ups in your sleeping bag will just get your heart pumping a little bit, and that's going to help warm you up on the inside of your bag. If still after all of this you are feeling cold, you might want to consider adding a closed cell foam sleeping pad, like this guy. Closed cell foam pads are great because they're really durable, they're inexpensive, and putting something like this underneath your already insulated sleeping pad is going to provide additional level of insulation and help keep you warm. Also, you should pee before bed, maybe even pee twice and then once in the middle of the night. Your body has to expend energy to essentially warm your urine, so by emptying your bladder before you go to sleep, you'll be a lot more comfortable at night. This video is going to cover how to construct a campfire. This will include the best practices for having a campfire, as well as where and how to assemble your fire, and then some tips for fully extinguishing that when you're all done. So we can't really talk about campfires without first talking about restrictions and regulations. Campfires are often thought to be just an inherent part of the camping experience, but increasingly they pose a risk to the environment and the ecosystem. So the first step is to check the rules and regulations for the region, as well as a specific campsite that you are headed to. These restrictions or regulations will tell you things like whether or not you're allowed to have a campfire, how you should get your wood, how you should put out the campfire, and just generally give you a really good understanding of the safety practices for the campsite that you are headed to. Keep in mind also that you don't have to have a campfire to have a good time camping, so if you're unsure about regulations, maybe just forego the fire entirely. So now that you know that you are allowed to have a campfire, there are a couple of rules that are just best practices whenever you are setting up a campfire. And the first one is how you get your wood. So you should definitely purchase your wood from within a local area. So by local, I mean within 50 miles of your campground. And the reason for this is that we don't want to accidentally transport in invasive species. So you'll just want to buy at a store locally or sometimes directly at the campground where you are going. The other thing with gathering wood is that you don't want to gather it. So leave the dead wood that is at your campsite alone and instead bring in everything that you plan on burning. A dead branch on the ground might look like it's not doing anything to you, but it's actually a really important part of the ecosystem, so it's best to just let it lie. Follow Leave No Trace principles whenever you have any questions around this, and again, there will be a link on Leave No Trace in the description below. So we just covered fire restrictions, and now we're going to talk about how to construct a campfire. But first I want to acknowledge that I will not be lighting any of these fire structures in front of me. You should always use a fire pit when you are out camping. If you're at a campground, it's likely that they will provide you with a fire pit, so please use that. And in addition to that, make sure you clear the area of any flammable items, make sure that there's no low-hanging branches above you that might catch on fire. All of this just to, mitigate the risk of starting a wildfire. Now that we've covered that, let's talk about the different resources that you'll use to ignite your fire. Really, those are tinder, kindling, and your fuel logs. So first there's tinder. Tinder are these small, highly flammable items that will ignite quickly and burn very hot, but not for very long. And these can be some things that you purchase, such as fire starter, stuff that you make or bring from home. These are cotton balls soaked in petroleum jelly, or you can use lint from your dryer. And then you can also cut off small shavings of wood from your fuel logs that you purchased locally. Another option with your tinder is to gather small twigs and sticks, but keep in mind that the most Leave No Trace friendly option is going to be to use tinder that you either bought or brought with you. After your tinder ignites, it should light your kindling on fire. Your kindling are those second level of logs in size, small things like these, or even some slightly larger logs like this guy here. And these are the small pieces of wood that will help to make the fire slightly larger and then burn the fuel logs. So the fuel logs are the large logs that make up the majority of the structure of your fire. So let's cover the three main fire structures that I have in front of me, starting with the cone shape. So the cone structure is probably the one that you are most familiar with. It's super easy to set up, and I think this is what a lot of us think of when we think of a campfire. The way that you'll do this is you will set up the kindling on the inside or on the bottom of your fire, and then you'll use the fuel logs to create this cone that all lean together in the center. And to light this, you will ignite your tinder, and then you will put it in on the bottom of the fire to catch the kindling on fire, and that will help to burn the logs. The plus side of using a cone is that it's really easy to ignite. It's a very easy structure to create, and it will ignite very quickly. The downside is that this does require a significant amount of maintenance. And by that I mean that once it's burning, it will all kind of start to collapse and you need to add logs to it. So if you are looking for a fire that requires less maintenance, you might want to go with the pyramid structure. So this pyramid structure is sometimes called the upside down fire, and that's because you basically construct it in the reverse of what you might expect from a fire by putting your larger logs on the bottom and then having your kindling and your tinder up towards the top. So you can see here that I have these large fuel logs and then some slightly smaller fuel logs, all going down in size until we get to where my kindling is. And to light this fire, what I will do is ignite the tinder and then put that on top, and that will burn down. The bonus of this, or the plus side of this, is that as that tinder and kindling start to break apart, those will fall down into the structure and then heat up and catch the larger logs on fire. So really what you get is something that burns for a very long time with very low maintenance. If you're looking for a fire that you can cook on or something that will provide coals very quickly, then the best bet is to do a log cabin. So this is the log cabin structure, and this one is kind of exactly what it sounds like. You're laying out your logs in the shape of a cabin. So here I have my logs on the bottom, 3 across, and then smaller fuel logs going through the center, and then just stacking up however high you want to. There are a couple different ways that people will add their kindling and their tinder to this fire. You can either leave a hole in the center and then just drop all your kindling down in there, add your tinder, or you can kind of slide your kindling into the center like I've done here, and then add your tinder that way. The plus side of the log cabin is that it's pretty foolproof and it'll provide coals really quickly. And since coals are the best method for cooking over a campfire, this can be great for that. I'm not going to go too much into campfire cooking in this video, but we do have an entire other video on how to cook at camp, and that will include some tips for cooking over your campfire. So now I am going to set up a log cabin structure in my fire pit, and we will get it going. So here lie the remains of my campfire. You can see that all I have left here are these coals. Now it might look like this campfire is totally put out, but it actually is not. These coals are still very warm. Yeah, they're actually very warm to the touch. And in order for a fire to be considered completely out, the coals need to be cool to the touch. While this might not look like much, it's still very easy for a forest fire to start, for something to ignite when you have coals like this. So this is still considered an active fire. To fully put this fire out, what I'm going to do is scoot these coals around the fire pit, kind of disperse them. And then from there, what I will do is pour some water into the fire pit. I just want to get enough water in here that the coals are now, again, cool to the touch, but I don't want to flood the fire pit. If you flood the fire pit, it's going to be really hard for the next person to come in here and make a fire. So whether that's you the following night cooking or the people at the campsite after you, don't flood the fire pit. We still want it to be a useful spot to have a fire. Alright, so now all the coals in my fire are cool to the touch. I have spread them out and ensured that this is not going to light up again and turn into a forest fire. Remember that it's really important to put your fire out completely so that you don't accidentally start a fire in the wilderness. But as always, it's even more important to make sure that you are following the fire restrictions for the area where you are camping. This video will cover the basics of cooking at camp. So this will include the camp cookware and flatware, some tips for grocery shopping and meal prep, as well as the 2 main techniques that you will use to cook at camp, and then just some tips on how to safely store your food and clean up after a meal. So the first thing that we're going to cover is your camp cookware and your flatware. If you're just going camping for the first time, it's completely fine to just bring your own cookware from home. Just don't bring your really nice stuff because things are more likely to get damaged when you're outside, even if you're being really careful. If you're cooking over a fire, stuff is gonna stain, you're gonna get dirt on it. So just leave the nice stuff at home, and that also goes for your flatware. Don't bring anything that might break because again, the likelihood of it breaking is just a lot more likely outside. If you're camping more often, you might want to consider getting specific flatware and cookware for your camping trips. When you're buying your utensils and your plates and bowls, there's really 3 different materials that you will find, and that is melamine and plastic, enamelware, and stainless steel. So plastic or melamine is probably one of the more popular options that you'll find for camping. The plus side of plastic is that it's very lightweight, it's really durable, and this is a great option for kids. Same thing with melamine. Again, these are just really durable and easy to clean, and they come in fun colors. If you don't want to use plastic for whatever reason, you can always look at enamelware or stainless steel. So enamelware is kind of like the retro classic campware that you might think of. And you can find this in a lot of different places now in a bunch of different colors. The downside of enamelware is that you can have chipping happen over time, but again, we're talking about after years of use, especially if they are well cared for. Last, you have stainless steel, which is my personal favorite. So the great thing about stainless steel is that it's super lightweight, it's easy to clean, and it will nest really small. And we do want to prioritize our space that our cookware takes up. Even though we're camping, it's still important to think about fitting everything into your car. The downside of stainless steel is that you can bend it out of shape, and the scraping noise that you'll get if you're using a stainless steel or titanium utensil can really be a deal breaker for some people. So now that you have chosen your utensils and flatware, it's time to talk about your cookware. There's 2 big categories of cookware that you will find for camping, and that is cast iron and coated aluminum or non-stick cookware. If you cook with cast iron at home, you might be someone who just really loves that technique and that method. You certainly get specific results from cooking with cast iron, and there are entire cookbooks that are written around cast iron pots and pans. If you're cooking over a fire, cast iron is really the best option, and it's going to give you a lot of opportunities to cook unique dishes at camp. If you want to go with the coated aluminum or the non-stick cookware, the great thing about this is that it all nests together really small. Oftentimes you get dual purpose out of a lid that can then become a pan or a pot that collapses down. And these are also super easy to clean up. The downside of these is that they really can't be used over a fire, or really shouldn't be used over a fire. So if that's your method of cooking, definitely go with cast iron. Let's talk through grocery shopping and meal planning for your camping trip. First thing that I want to note on this, and probably the most important, is that when you go camping, you should plan to eat foods that you normally eat. Camping is not the time to test out a new diet or try and cut calories or introduce new recipes and foods that your body's unfamiliar with. Essentially, we just want you and your body to be as comfortable in a potentially uncomfortable environment as possible, so that means eating stuff that you are used to. It also means it's probably not the time to only eat s'mores and hot dogs unless that's what you do on a day-to-day basis. So I would recommend doing some meal planning before you go grocery shopping. I like to put my meals into my phone and then count how many calories I'll be getting just to make sure that I'm going to be getting enough for the day. That's the other thing with camping. You're probably going to be more active on a camping trip than you are on a day-to-day basis, so you do need to account for a little bit more caloric intake than usual. What I like to do is write my meals down on my phone and then make a grocery list before I head to the store. So if you're someone who really likes to cook, you might want to plan to cook every single meal, but if you're someone who's probably going to be out during the day on a hike or biking or whatever, I would recommend doing something simple like maybe having oatmeal for breakfast and then sandwiches or wraps for lunch, and really saving dinner time to be your big cooking at camp experience. While you're meal planning, make sure that you're accounting for how much space you have in your cooler for perishable goods and then in your car for dry goods. That way you don't run out of space in your cooler and have things go bad. When you're packing your cooler, think about putting the foods for later in the trip towards the bottom of your cooler, and then the stuff that you'll go through first towards the top, so you don't have to dig through and potentially let cold air out. I tend to err on the side of having more dry goods if possible, so this may mean dehydrating food if that's something that you want to do. I love my dehydrator for dehydrating herbs as well as fresh vegetables or lentils, and this makes it really easy to cook this stuff up at camp, and it helps to save valuable space in my cooler. If you've never used a dehydrator before and that's something that you are interested in trying, we have an article below that you can check out, and it is definitely something that I would recommend. Great, so you've planned your meals, you know what you're going to eat, and now it is time to prep for the trip. While you totally can just put everything into your cooler and deal with all the preparation when you get to camp, it might be easier to do a little bit of pre-trip preparation, and this might include chopping up vegetables or setting aside portion sizes. I like to do this in these stasher bags. You can chop up all your vegetables in here or set aside portions, and this just makes it really easy to grab something and start cooking right away instead of worrying about the whole process of chopping and prepping and then cleaning up when you're done. Last tip for prepping for camp cooking is to bring a reusable bag like this one. So I always bring some reusable bags with me because inevitably there is something that I forgot to get before I got to my campsite. So having a bag like this that makes it easy to run to the closest grocery store is really helpful. Plus this gives me a good spot to store my dry goods or to store different meals. And just in general, having a reusable bag has been a really helpful tool for me in my camp cook kit. So now that you are at camp, it is time to cook your food. There are two main methods of cooking at camp, and those are a stove like this one or over a campfire. The benefit of a camp stove is that this is going to be the most similar experience to what you have at home, especially if you have a 2-burner stove like this guy I have in front of me. So 2-burner stoves are the most common types of camp stoves that you will find, but really camping and backpacking stoves run the gamut in terms of size, cost, and weight. So you really have infinite options on what you choose for a stove. If you're using a 2-burner stove, you'll have these dials on the front that control the flame, and then you might have a igniter button or light it with a match, and then it'll connect up to its fuel source, which in this case is propane. The plus sides of stoves, again, are really just that you're basically cooking the same way that you would at home, but you do have to bring fuel with you and probably bring some extra fuel, and they do require some care and maintenance to last you as long as they should. The second method for cooking at camp is over a campfire. If this is what you want to do, then the first step is to check the rules and regulations at your campsite to make sure that having a fire is even allowed. Even after this, you might want to consider having a backup option for cooking just in case wood is not readily available or in case you get a flash rainstorm that puts out your chances of having a fire. But once you've decided to cook over a fire, there are a couple of tips that you should be aware of. The first thing is that you'll need to plan ahead and really prepare to start your fire long before it's time to cook, because the best way to cook over a fire is over coals. That means that you need to give your fire enough time to burn down 2 coals, because that's really going to give you the best method for cooking. You have a few different options for cookware over a fire. The first one is Dutch oven, cast iron pots like this one, or just cast iron pans. These are really great if you're in it for the novelty of cooking over a fire, and there are some recipes that can really only be made in a Dutch oven over a fire. But then you also have foil packets, which work really well for cooking vegetables, and then roller roasters or kebabs for roasting things. One of the great things about cooking over a fire is that there can be minimal cleanup. So if what you want to do is just enjoy the experience sitting around the fire, roasting vegetables or meats or whatever, then cooking over a fire can be really fun. Definitely this is an option that is more of a novelty, and it is definitely going to extend your cooking experience. So if that's what you want to do, cooking over a campfire, then make sure that you really know the best way to do that and also how to put your fire out when you are done. For this, I'd recommend referring back to our How to Have a Campfire video, which we will link in the description below. So you've cooked your food and you've eaten your food, and now it is time to clean up. Cleaning up after cooking is not only important to keep a tidy campsite, but it's also important to minimize the smells and leftover food that we leave out for animals. Having this kind of impact on animals where they become reliant on human resources for food is just a bad leave no trace practice. And so refer back to your leave no trace principles if you have any questions about this. There are a couple methods for cleaning your dishes, and one is to get a collapsible sink like the ones I have in front of me. So this is a smaller sized collapsible sink, and this is a medium sized collapsible sink. These are great because they pack really small and they hold a lot of water. If this is how you are washing your dishes, then you can just put all your soapy water in your dishes in here and wash them that way. Another popular method for washing dishes is to use 3 separate bins. And in these bins, you'll have essentially 3 stations for cleaning your dishes. The first one will have soapy water, and then you will have a rinse station. And then the third bin will have a diluted sanitizer, something to sterilize your dishes. This is especially popular if you are camping with groups, especially groups of kids, because everyone can be in charge of cleaning their own dishes. As far as soap goes, you'll want to have a concentrated biodegradable soap like this one here. And then I like to bring a few different methods for cleaning my dishes. So I have a rag for wiping them, a little scrubby sponge for scrubbing my dishes, and then a scraper for getting off the really caked on pieces of food. After you have washed your dishes, you are going to have dirty water or gray water that you have to properly dispose of. It's possible that your campsite has a designated area for washing your dishes and disposing of your gray water, so abide by those regulations. But if there isn't a designated place to dispose of gray water, then you'll want to spread that gray water on the ground. Do this far away from your campsite and everyone else's campsites, and you'll want to spray it instead of just dumping it out. The reason for this is that by spreading the water on the ground, we limit the concentrated area of impact that we have, because this can be an attractant for animals, as the gray water is likely to still have some sort of smell. So now that you've washed your dishes, it's time to pack up all your cook and camp wear as well as your leftover food. And to do this, you'll need to put your food in some sort of animal-proof container. It's a safe bet to assume that most places are going to allow you to keep your food in a locked car, but if you are in a campsite where there is a bear locker, you need to use the bear locker. Bears are smart, and they have learned to get into people's cars in some areas, so if you're provided a bear locker, please use it. You can also use a bear canister, like this one that I have here, but again, in most areas, storing food and stoves and cookware in a locked car is going to be the best bet. This video is going to cover camp magic, or ways that you can elevate your camping experience. I'm going to talk about some things to bring from home to make your campsite feel cozier, and then also cover some activities to do at camp, things like s'mores or wildlife viewing, or taking advantage of the lack of light pollution and going stargazing. One of the benefits of car camping is that you are only limited to bring what you can fit in your car, so consider bringing stuff from home to create a cozier camp environment. This could be a favorite blanket, or the pillow off your bed, or even a rug like the one that I have here. It's also a good idea to bring some camp furniture if you have it, so you can bring camp chairs, like the one that I'm sitting in. Ta-da. Or if you have access to trees, you might want to bring some hammocks. If there won't be a picnic table at your campsite, you can always bring a folding table. Again, all of these things just to create a more homey feeling campsite. Because when the sun goes down at a campsite, you no longer have any source of light, you should probably bring some lanterns or lighting with you. String lights are really great for stringing between trees and just outlining your camping area, but you can also bring lanterns, like this gas-powered one. But even a small lantern like this guy is going to help create some ambient lighting. You'll also want to bring some stuff to do while you are at your campground. So I like to bring a book to read in the tent at night, and then I love to carry my whittling knife with me for whittling at a campfire. And you can also bring games, things like cards or word games are great, or even just to know some word games to play without any necessary physical game, I guess. And then another really good thing to bring are sporting games, so things like frisbees or a ball toss game. Obviously, we go camping so we can spend more time outside, so having ways to play sports outside is a really great way to take advantage of that. You also might want to bring binoculars to improve your wildlife viewing experience, and of course a camera so you can really capture some of these magical moments. All these things might not seem like must-haves for a camping experience, but they can really make all the difference. You're bound to see all sorts of neat wildlife when you are on your camping trip, but remember to view animals from a distance and without approaching them. Never approach animals when you are outside. If you have any questions about this, just refer back to your Leave No Trace principles to make sure you're being a good steward of the outdoors. If you want to get a closer viewing of wildlife, consider getting some binoculars, like these guys. Binoculars are really great to view birds, to view faraway animals, and they're also good for checking out mountain peaks. If you're looking to kill several hours with kids or even with adults, you can use wildlife identification books and go on hikes. So you have identification books like this one, which is for birds, and then there are also plant identification books and even ones specifically for kids, such as this one on poop identification. It's a pretty cool book. If you want to take pictures of the animals that you see on your identification hikes and you want some tips on how to do that, we have a great article on wildlife photography, and that will be linked below. Everyone knows that s'mores and camping go hand in hand, but maybe next time you go camping, consider trying a little different method to s'mores. Maybe swapping out the graham crackers for sweet potatoes, or adding in a peanut butter cup instead of chocolate. I'm not going to over-explain this to you, but we do have some great recipes in the links below, so check those out and maybe spice up your s'more experience next time you're camping. While you're out camping, you are going to have a lot less light pollution than you might be used to in your town or in your city, so this is a great chance to take advantage of that and go stargazing. There are apps that you can download on your phone, as well as different books to identify what you're seeing, but then we also have an article on the intro to stargazing, as well as a handy stargazing map that you can find in the links below for the Northern Hemisphere. Congratulations! You have now finished the REI Co-op class Intro to Camping. Hopefully you found this video helpful and you feel well equipped to spend a night under the stars. To use this class to its fullest, check out our articles and videos linked below, as well as our downloadable resources. And don't forget that you have access to REI Conversations in case you have any further questions. Thanks for watching!